All right, super simple. That's really about it for in size. So if that bear, when that bear comes in, you know, on a stationary, this is probably going to be the easiest barrel you've ever built. All we really need to do, find a barrel. We can do a hole in the top like we did on our last barrels, or just so you can fill the barrel, or you could do a removable lid. So that's pretty flexible. It don't really matter what you do there because you're just going to chain the barrel loose so the bears can kind of roll it around. And we're going to plug some holes in the barrel that your feed drips out, or your bear bait kind of just trickles out as you roll the barrel. So really all we're going to do is drill some anywhere from 1 inch to 1.5 inch holes size in this barrel. And we're just going to put a couple on one side and 3 on the other. And that's really all we need, depending on what you're going to use for bait. So if you're using like bigger items that aren't going to maybe come out as easy, there's a couple things you can do there. You can either go with a bigger hole, but the problem with those bigger holes is if you ever do use a smaller bait like your grains and your sweet feeds and even trail mix, things like that, it pours out pretty quickly. So the whole goal of using a roller barrel is to slow those bears down. As they roll it, we're only getting a little dribble on the ground, and that keeps them from kind of really cleaning out that barrel so quickly. They've got to come in, it drizzles a little on the ground, and it just kind of really slows them down so they don't plow through the bait quite so fast. Really, the hole size is going to depend on what you're using for bait. So if you're mostly using like small roller barrel style bait, you know, like your trail mixes and your nuts and your grains, your sweet feeds, any of your farm feeds or animal feeds work really good in a roller barrel, but you'll want to do like 1 inch to 1.5 inch hole max. And you don't need very many of those because it'll pour out pretty fast. Now, if you're using like breads and cakes and chunks of meat and bigger items that just aren't going to break down as easy and maybe be a little stickier, that's going to bind the bait together, you're probably going to want to do more like 2 to 2.5 inch holes. And what you can do with that bigger bait, if it don't break down, is throw some rocks in the barrel. And those rocks, as the bears roll it around, will start to break all that bait up into crumbs, and then it'll come out those holes a lot easier. So if you have like pretzels or any of your, you know, more dehydrated baits or stuff that's a little dried out or harder, then throw some rocks in there and it'll help kind of break that up and churn that bait enough that, you know, it'll start to slowly, you know, drip out because it's rolling, or it's because it's starting to turn into crumbs. So it'll start to come out of those holes pretty easy. So I wouldn't get too excited on getting a lot of holes because you're just gonna, you know, that bear rolls that barrel a little bit and you're gonna lose a lot of bait. But really it's personal preference. So just kind of think about that when you're putting your holes in here. What we're going to do on ours, we're using mostly trail mix and popcorn, and we've got some dehydrated marshmallows that are really little and these little brownie bite things. So we're just going to put 3 of probably 1.5 inch holes on this side, and then 180 degrees, we're going to put 3 more holes on that side as well. And then we're just going to put a hole right here and a hole in the top of the lid that we'll run our chain through. And then that way we can just chain this barrel loose so the bears will come in and roll it around on the ground and they've got some slack there, but not enough slack that they're going to roll it behind a tree or somewhere where we can't get a shot. Because like I've said in our previous videos, you don't want to come in to your bait site and that barrel is rolled around the back side of the tree, because now you got to go up, put fresh scent on the bait and roll that barrel back around. And you want to steer clear of going to that bait site on the night you're going to hunt. All right, super simple. That's really about it for a feeder barrel. You just need a removable top, or some sort of hole here so you can fill the barrel, poke some smaller holes in the sides, and not too many. Keep them, so that bait lasts a while. And then just, if you've got one of those, like right here in the top, we've got that bung hole, so we can just unthread that. That's one of our holes. Run the chain through there, and then we can take this end of the chain and run right around the tree. keep the slack long enough we can still stand it up when we leave. And then they'll tip this barrel over and roll it around the ground. I was lucky because on the back side, there's another little gutted piece that's actually like 2.5 inches. So if I do end up with some bigger bait that just, you know, is not falling through, then I can just unscrew this and I've got a little bit bigger hole on the back side. And then some of that bigger bait that won't fall out anyways is good, because those bears are going to sit there and roll that barrel around, try to get that bait out. It's never going to come out if it's a bigger bait, but they're going to think, you know, so they'll sit there and it might buy you some time. They'll sit there for a day or two and kind of just keep working this barrel, trying to get those bigger chunks of chocolate or breads or, you know, meat chunks or whatever. The good thing with meat chunks is, you know, they'll get rancid in there and they'll really put out some scent. And it kind of helps keep your bears from, you know, getting covered in it. We don't use a lot of meat just because we don't want our bears covered in that stinky stuff. So, but if you don't mind the smell, you could put some bigger chunks of chicken or meat or something in here and it'll get good and rotten and it'll give off a good smell. So it'll attract bears to that barrel even when it's empty with all your sweets and all your smaller, you know, animal feeds and things like that. All right, let's test it out, see how it does. We've got some trail mix here. We also put in a little bit of granola. And we'll put the lid on and kind of see what it does. So we've got about, oh, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches of bait in there. A lot of times right here, I'll take this nut and weld it to this clamp. That way we don't have to worry about ever losing it. Just give it a little tack weld right there. And then we can just have a little screwdriver on hand, or you could even just tie a wrench here and, you know, just let it chain, maybe hook it to the chain or something like that. So you always have that little wrench to snug that down tight. All right, let's take it outside and see what it does. Test it out. Take it outside, see what it does, test it out. All right, so the bear's gonna come in and they're gonna knock this over. And then they're gonna start rolling it around. All right, this is perfect. We've got little piles and it'll take them a long time. It still seems like it's putting out a lot of feed. This is all really small stuff, but it'll take them a long time to eat through each of these piles. And then they'll move forward and they'll eat another pile and then they might roll some more out. A lot of times they'll run off or they'll leave and they'll come back, and they just, you know, it really does buy you a lot of time than just being able to rake it out on the ground. So for your weekend warriors, or maybe you guys that just can't, you know, you're traveling a long ways and you just can't rebait every 3 days, the roller barrel is the only answer. All right, a couple strategies with these bait barrels when you build them like a roller barrel, or some call a trickle barrel, is really hole placement is not super critical. Besides, we like to try to keep from drilling any holes right at the very bottom of the barrel. So we like to come up 6 to 8 inches. That way when the barrel is standing up, a lot of your smaller critters can't get inside. You know, mice, your chipmunks and tree squirrels and things. If they don't have something to step on, they can't crawl inside as easy either. And it also just keeps from that bait. You know, you'll always have 8 inches of bait in the bottom that is not going to pour out when the barrel is standing up. When we leave, after we've got done rebaiting, we always stand the barrel up so the animals can, or when the bears come in, they'll knock this barrel over. From a distance, when we walk in, we can see if the bear has been on the bait side or not without even walking up to the bait. There's very few other critters that could knock this barrel over besides maybe deer or elk if they got to nudging on it. So I like to come up from the bottom 8 inches, and same 6 to 8 inches from the top, and try to kind of keep them in this section right here. Other than that, it's really not that critical. And hole size is really not that critical. That's personal preference as far as what you're going to use for bait. We use an 1.5 inch hole, like I said. You know, we could go a little bit smaller if we wanted to slow them down, or if we was using just grain, we would probably do more like a 5/8 inch hole and maybe put a couple extra holes in the barrel. I do know a lot of guys will take and they'll just put one like 2 or 3 inch hole in this barrel. And that works really good if you've got a lot of slack in your chain. so those bears can really roll that barrel around, and you've got a lot of room for them to play with that barrel. This particular barrel, we put holes on this side and 180 degrees on the back side, mainly just because we're actually going to come around the tree with 2 chains, and we're going to hook to that barrel. We're not going to give them a lot of slack because my shooting window is pretty small in this area. It's pretty thick, and I don't want those bears coming in and that barrel is spun clear around the tree. We are on a little bit of a hill, and so I don't want them to get too many revolution, or be able to roll that barrel too much farther, because I want to stay within our shooting window. And that's another reason we're going to come around the tree and hook the chain to both sides of the barrel rather than just one single chain, is that way they can only roll it so far before that chain gets tight, and then it's got to go back the other direction. And so that'll kind of keep them in that window, where if we did one single chain, it would be a lot easier for them to keep rolling that barrel and get it around the back side of the tree. They could still do it with coming around with both chains, but it's going to be a lot harder, because as that chain twists up, it's going to get tight, and that's going to stop them from going that direction, where now they'll have to start going back the other way, and that chain's going to get tight again. I've seen guys also put right here in the end, right here, I've seen guys just attach to the very end of the barrel, and that way they've got, plenty of slack and the chain don't get twisted up in there. That works too. Cable or something like that. I wouldn't use rope. I've seen guys use rope, but you would want to replace that every so often, just because it's going to get chewed on, and it's also just going to get sun rot. Once you do it with some cable or chain, you can just leave that chain with that barrel for forever, and you're not going to have to worry about replacing that very often. You'll just want to make sure you put like a heavy flat washer on the inside, just so they can't pull it through. These barrels are heavy, but they are a thin gauge material, so it don't take much to get pulled right through the barrel after a time of wear and tear. All right, a couple other things with using a barrel like this is you can still pour on your icings and your fry oil and things like that. And if we were to do that, I usually kind of just smear it around the holes. And but you can smear it really anywhere on the barrel and pour it on the barrel, just so you can still get some good tracking on the ground. You can also just pour it around the area that that feeder barrel is going to be rolling, just so you can still get a lot of good scent on those bears for tracking scent, to kind of create that wagon wheel effect. We'll talk about the wagon wheel effect on some other videos, and I'll come back later on and I'll link those here in the description, so check it out. It might already be there. So you can spread your scents, keep things on the barrel just to get more scent on their paws. A lot of times what we'll do is cover them in some oil or some icing, and then we'll sprinkle a little bit of our feed additives like our triple threat or something like that, just because it's a super sweet product, and they'll sit and lick it off their paws for days. But it is good tracking scent too, because it's so strong in scent that they'll track that around. So you can still use all your tracking scents on your barrels. That don't really matter. The other question is, do we want to use a removable top like this, or do we want to use a hinge top lid? That don't really matter. On a feeder barrel or a roller barrel, I really, just a removable top is fine, because you've got that room to be able to just stand the barrel up, pop the lid off, and dump it full of bait. The reason we don't like the removable lid on a stationary barrel that is fixed to the tree is just, especially on a side hill, is for the fact that when we loosen that barrel, we got to fight that ring, and sometimes those barrels will get a little bit tweaked, especially from sucking them up to the tree, that it gets hard to get those lids on. And then those rings are kind of finger smashers. If you get your finger in there while you're snapping that ring on, they're just kind of a pain in the butt. So once we get a stationary barrel mounted to the tree, we want to just come in and do a hinge top. That way we can just flip that lid and we can dump that in. We've got a design or a bait barrel series that you can look at on our channel that explains that completely. But we want to come up, we want to flip that lid, fill it full of bait, maybe just give those tie downs another click or two, just because they stretch over time, and we don't want to have to loosen that. A lot of times we'll loosen it and it'll fall down on the ground, roll down the hill, especially one of our baits is really steep and it's just a pain in the butt. So on our stationary barrels, I prefer a hinge lid, hinge top, but on these roller barrels, these are so much easier to build. They already come with a removable top, and I like the ones with the clamp style lid, so you don't have to deal with this bolt, or I'll just chain I'll go to Harbor Freight and buy a cheap wrench, and I'll just chain it right to the barrel, so it's always with the chain. I'll just slide the chain right through the other end of the wrench, and I've always got it, so I can just snug this down. You want to be able to snug this tight, or those bears eventually will get this ring off of there. So just finger tight won't do it. We've had several that we've did finger tight and it just won't work. All right, one other trick we can talk about is if you happen to have a barrel that you're baiting with breads or bigger items, and then you switch bait to a trail mix or a grain or something small, and it's just pouring out too fast. You can get fancy and you can come up with ways to put some sheet metal on the inside of these holes that are slotted, so you can kind of have adjustment on these holes. That's getting pretty fancy. We don't spend the time to do that. What we'll do if we want to slow these down a little bit, maybe we drilled too many holes and we just feel like we're not really slowing ourselves down or slowing the bait down, is just take some branches and things like that, and you can throw in the barrel to just kind of help disrupt that flow. And then we'll take like some, sticks or pine branches or something with, a lot of good foliage on it. And on the inside of the barrel, we'll just pull those through the hole. So we'll stuff them in on the inside. So they're inside the barrel, but then we'll pull them, kind of through the holes. So they're soft enough you can still roll that barrel like a pine bough or something like that, but they're gonna help disrupt that flow. Now, eventually the bears may pull them out of there and they'll get broke off. So this is something you kind of got to do every time you come in and rebait is, do what you can to disrupt that flow, putting rocks and sticks and branches. You could even stuff some sticks through the holes on the outside, but they usually normally fall out, where a good compacted, set of pine boughs that is a good fresh branch, you can stuff through here, willows, really anything that's a good leafy product that's soft enough that it can still roll, and you can stuff those through here really tight and they'll stay a lot longer than you think. But you just want to be watching them, so you can kind of fix that situation every time you come in to bait. It's just an easy way to kind of slow down the flow. If you walk in and your feeder barrel or roller barrel is still empty every time you come in and you just don't feel like it's really benefiting you any, we need to slow that feed down. We need to get those bears to where they're not consuming as much and not getting that opportunity to consume as much food. So multiple ways to do that. I really like to keep them pretty well fed when we're just baiting for them first few weeks. I want them to have plenty of food and not disrupt the chance of, maybe running out of bait and those bears will only stick around for an extra day or two and then they're going to go find another bait site, or they're just going to wander off so they can keep finding food. So a lot of times when we come in to hunt though, say we're going to take a 4-day weekend and we're there to hunt, I really slow them down, because it just, as you slow that bait down for just a few days, they'll get hungrier. They still know there's bait here, but we're slowing them way down, and it just kind of increases that activity for a few days. And we've watched this a lot on the trail cameras to where, you can watch, and as soon as that barrel starts to go empty, there's a period there of a day or two that you actually start to see a lot more activity at different times, especially daylight activity. You'll see that kind of really increase, but there's a window there where then all of a sudden bears are gone, because they start to realize, hey, this quit producing. Just like anything in the wild, berry patches and different areas for mushrooms and insects, as those areas, depending on the weather and the green grass and all that, as they start to quit producing food, those bears move to other areas. And so same thing with a bait barrel. They're going to come in and kind of pick around and clean up all the crumbs, but you've got a window there where you lose opportunity because those bears are going to leave, and you don't want to disrupt that routine. The routine is very important, so you don't ever want to run out of bait completely for more than a day, in my opinion. A day is fine, but more than a day, you start to get risky, and some of those bears are going to hang right tight and they're going to come right back. But those bigger boars, they just lose interest, and sometimes it's hard to get them back. So find out ways, come up with ideas that you can disrupt the flow if you need to. If you drill your holes too big, you need to slow down that bait, there's some strategies for you that you can slow that down. All right, guys, that's it for the roller barrel design. They also call this a trickle barrel, so roller, trickle. Make sure to comment below, let us know. I'm sure we missed some things. This is just how we do it. There's a lot of personal preference here. We love to hear from you. We like to hear of new ideas. So guys that have done this for a long time and you've come up with some different strategies, we'd love to hear from you. But yeah, that's really it for the roller barrel. Pretty simple design, a little bit of strategy that goes into it, but nothing major at all. Make sure to like and subscribe and follow our channel. Turn on the notifications. We've got a lot of really good content. We're going to start trying to pump out videos at least once a week for the next few months, probably, until we really get into bear season, and then we'll be gone quite often. We'll be at the shop a few days a week so we can ship orders probably Monday through Thursday, and then we're going to try to take some 3-4 day weekends. So the videos will slow down a little, but also we'll be getting so much more new content. Make sure to like and subscribe. I think you'll enjoy the upcoming videos.